Hello, this is Curtis.
Hello, Curtis. How are you?
Hey, doing well. Good morning, Jesper.
Good morning. I'm just sharing the slide for the time being, and then I thought just a couple of minutes before then you can take over. Is that all right?
That sounds great. Thank you so much.
So we just have a few put in, but so we can just mute and then wait for another 12 minutes, Curtis, if that's all right.
Sounds great. Yep, just here to make sure everything's in order. Just an FYI, I think you have the video disabled. I don't know if you'd like me to go on video, but I just wanted to let you know.
Okay, I'll just make you co-host. Perfect.
Thank you.
And good morning to you, Curtis. We're just waiting a little bit longer for the remaining participants to join, but if you want to launch any presentation, that's fine.
Great, thank you.
All right. Welcome to the webinar Innovation Capital, how to compete like the world's most innovative leaders. Great leaders of innovation know that creativity is not enough. They succeed not only on the basis of their ideas, but because they have vision, reputation, and networks to win the backing needed to commercialize them. It turns out that this quality, called innovation capital, is measurably more important than innovation, than just being creative. The authors of the book, Innovation Capital, have spent decades studying how people get great ideas and how people test and develop those ideas. Co-author Curtis Lefranc will now share what they have learned from the research designed to determine how people compete for and obtain resources to launch new ideas. Because how can you build a personal reputation for innovation? What techniques can you use to amplify your innovation capital? And what it means to provide visionary leadership and how you can achieve it. It is our great pleasure to work with Curtis Lefranc. And Curtis is the CEO of Innovators DNA. The firm supports and consults some of the world's most innovative companies. And Curtis's firm also develops the Forbes list of the world's most innovative companies. Curtis also teaches on our programs where we help individuals and firms with their innovation capabilities. My name is Jesper Nytorp Bergman, and I'll be your host for this webinar. You can ask questions along the way through the chat function. If you cannot see the chat function, if you move your mouse, you should be able to see it. At the end, there will be around 5 to 7 minutes of Q&A where you can ask Curtis questions. So ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure to welcome Curtis Lefranc. And Curtis, please help us understand what innovation capital is and how we might develop our innovation capital.
Thank you so much, Jesper. Really appreciate that warm introduction, and it's a pleasure to be here with all of you. Jesper teed up the conversation we'd like to have here perfectly as we talk about some of these different elements. This is the introduction and the agenda that we had in mind. Obviously, this is a fairly short webinar. We've got just a few minutes here to share a couple of key ideas and concepts, hopefully that will pique your interest, give you a little bit of a useful takeaway, and allow you to continue the conversation and the journey back on your end. So I'll do a quick intro here. I want to put a plug in for your personal creative capacity. That's something that we know without a doubt through the research. And then as Jesper noted, in particular, there's many different topics we could talk about with regards to innovation, but we thought we would spend a moment on this important skill and capability around what we call innovation capital. So just by way of very quick introduction, Innovators DNA, we have the privilege of being able to support and teach at AVT. And part of what we do is we work with individuals and organizations to build world-class innovation capability. And innovation capital is a part of that. These ideas come from academic origins, places like AVT, as well as Harvard and MIT, Stanford, INSEAD, etc. And as Jesper noted, a big source of our inspiration is studying the world's most innovative companies. This is a list that we generate. So just as an example, we had a chance to interview Elon Musk and his executive team last year. Same thing with Jeff Bezos and many of his team members. And they have incredible processes and skills and innovation capital that allow them to innovate over and over again. So that's just a little bit of context for where these ideas are coming from. You know, I just want to spend a moment on your personal creative capacity. Our first body of work was really around what we call the innovator's DNA, this notion of where do disruptive ideas come from. We then have a second book called The Innovator's Method that's looking at the processes of innovation. But from these two books, we want to call out a particular point that you may or may not be aware of, but the majority of the world out there believes that there are haves or have-nots when it comes to innovation. In other words, you or your peers, your colleagues, your direct reports, maybe even your family members, your children have this belief that I'm either creative or I just don't have it. And it's not something that I can participate in. And you couldn't be further from the truth. We want to dispel this myth that there are left brain and right brain individuals, and instead help you understand that it is so much more about how you nurture your creative capacity. Okay? You are a tremendously creative individual, right? And instead of asking, oh, am I creative or not? We would ask you to shift your mindset and instead ask yourself, how can I tap into my creativity? Help your children understand, hey, how can they tap into their creativity? It's a wonderful message of hope, okay? And there are many different answers. Okay? One of these, one of our bodies of research is around the ideal characteristics. Okay? Can you develop more of a beginner's mindset? Can you have more resilience and grit? Can you have greater comfort with ambiguity or a bias for action, etc.? We have 5 discovery skills that we've learned are incredibly vital to unlocking creativity. And then we have these processes of innovation. Can we go deep with design thinking and customer immersion? Can we run rapid experiments and build prototypes to test our assumptions? Okay, there's a lot of rich material here that you can utilize to develop and extend your creative capacity. Okay? Now, we want to talk about one particular facet in a little bit more detail, and this is what we call innovation capital. And what an interesting word, an interesting phrase. What does it mean? Well, I would like to demonstrate or bring this concept to life with a little bit of a case study or example. By now, I'm sure many of you have been following Tesla and its meteoric rise to where it is today in the markets. Okay? It's very rowdy CEO and founder, Elon Musk. Right? Maybe some of you have invested in Tesla and caught some of the latest surge together with Bitcoin and blockchain and all of the madness that we're seeing in the markets. But there's something very interesting that is going on and has frankly been going on for maybe a decade or more. Now, I want you to just kind of follow along here and maybe you could type in the chat if you know some of the answers. But I'm going to ask you to just see if you can guess for a moment. How many cars did the Ford Motor Company manufacture in 2019? And what is their market cap today? All right, let's go ahead and reveal. Let's take a look. So they made 17 million cars that were sold. Okay, and they have a decent sized market cap, $48 billion. Ain't nothing to sneeze at. Now we can continue on. One of the largest manufacturers of cars in Europe, right? We've got 11 million and $127 billion market cap. Okay, great, interesting, very, very successful. Toyota, a similar sized market volume here, but almost double in market cap. So these are incredibly valuable automotive manufacturers. And then let's go to Tesla, right? Maybe we would expect them to be, somewhat similar, and we're not even close, right? We're not even at a tenth of what some of these other automotive manufacturers are at. So in 2019, less than 400,000 cars manufactured, and yet just astronomical, right? The market today values Tesla at $700 billion. So what is going on here, right? Why the discrepancy between what seems to be the actual value of Tesla versus what the world is valuing it at today? A big part of this is what we would call innovation capital, and the ability that Elon Musk in particular has to tell the story of Tesla. Okay? And if you haven't heard of Tesla's master plan series, I highly encourage you to go on the web, look it up, and read about it. But this is Elon Musk going out and sharing his vision, his master plan for Tesla's innovation roadmap with the world. And that is part of why the world has said, we buy into this, and we're going to value Tesla at this incredible amount. And the funny thing is, if you look at other highly innovative individuals, right, like this individual right here, Mark Benioff, CEO and founder of Salesforce, okay, they call out the same thing. In fact, he uses the term right here. Okay, my ability to generate consistent innovations for this organization is derived from what I might call innovation capital. This ability to come up with, communicate, and then achieve a vision, okay, for new products, new services, new offerings over and over again. And this is something that is tied to me. To some extent, it's tied now to Salesforce. But as new leaders come into play, they're going to have to accrue and develop their own innovation capital. That is what it means to be an innovation leader. Okay? I think that's a really important narrative that Benioff and other innovative leaders are trying to share with the world. Okay? And we can be even more historical. This is one of our favorite stories. We break this case study down in the book, but you have some incredible innovators and inventors here. Thomas Edison, Nikola Tesla. Right? I'm sure many of you know Edison. Tesla obviously is the namesake of Tesla, the company today, because Elon Musk admired Nikola so much. And you can see here just a snapshot of these incredibly prolific and creative individuals. These are some of the innovations that they are responsible for generating and bringing to life. Okay? Now, we want to make a point, a little bit tragic, honestly. Okay? On one end, we have Edison, who was not only a wonderful inventor, but he was also an innovation leader, as we would term it. And Edison was able to go on. He was able to commercialize his offerings. He was able to form what eventually became General Electric and profited greatly from it. He won the Congressional Medal of Honor. Inventors Day here in the US is named after him. Okay? And then in contrast, you might argue equally prolific, equally successful as an inventor, absolutely abysmal when it came to innovation capital. And his personal fortune suffered as a result. He was not able to communicate his ideas effectively. He wasn't able to raise capital or garner support, investors, team members to bring his ideas to life. He actually died alone and penniless in a hotel at the end of his life. And so a little bit of a cautionary tale about this extraordinary individual and the lack of innovation capital and how he suffered from that. You will see this story, now that you have the lens to look for it, play out over and over again. And you will find individuals that might be incredibly creative, extraordinary inventors, but they need additional support and help. There's an ongoing narrative, right, and has been for many years, about the Woz, Steve Wozniak, right, paired with Steve Jobs. Woz was an incredibly gifted technical inventor, right? You could argue that he was behind a lot of the core technology that drove Apple's early success. But it wasn't until Jobs came by, partnered with Woz, and was able to bring innovation capital to bear. And obviously Jobs was a genius at this side of the equation, telling stories, spinning his reality distortion field, some of these wonderful elements. So that's a little bit of setting the stage for innovation capital. Hopefully that makes sense and it impresses upon you the importance of innovation capital. Now, hopefully by this point, you're nodding your head saying, okay, yes, I get it. Innovation capital, it's important. So what? Next, what do I do? How do I garner? How do I develop my own innovation capital? Well, from our research, we have 4 primary tenets that we have uncovered that we believe can help you to develop your own personal innovation capital. There are 3 subtypes of capital that you may already have some element of that you can also develop further. So what we call human capital. How can you accrue the relationships and the support you need from investors, from sponsors, from colleagues and team members? Okay? What we might call social capital. Okay? How can you help bring people along, convince them that this is worth their time? And then lastly, from a sub-capital perspective, reputation capital, a really important one here. But how do you actually develop a name and a brand and get known within your community, within your organization? Say, oh yeah, Jesper, AVT, this individual is really good at innovation. I'm going to turn to them for that, right? And then we find there's this 4th element that connects the dots across these different types of capital that actually can amplify all of the work that we do here. And these are what we call impression amplifiers. Okay? So I want to go ahead and just give you a few examples and case studies from our work on some of these different elements. We don't have time to go through all of them, obviously, but hopefully these will be useful as you think about your human, social, and reputation capital and how you can amplify these over time. So let's go ahead and start with human capital. There are some key skills that you can develop to further extend your human capital. We have some of these captured right here. We can be better forward thinkers. Okay, I'm going to spend a moment on that particular topic in a moment. We can also be better creative problem solvers. We can develop our powers of persuasion and promotion, and we can extend our personal creativity. So let's give you an example here of forward thinking. One of our favorite individuals to spend time with on this topic is Satya Nadella. Now, I want you to look at his profile for a moment. Okay, so as many of you might know, Satya is actually the CEO of Microsoft right now. You might argue that he has been incredibly successful as a CEO, took the reins from Steve Ballmer, and has just led Microsoft on an incredible transformation. Now, however, if you didn't know that prior to him becoming CEO, you might look over his resume and kind of shrug your shoulders and say, all right, University of Wisconsin, no big deal. One of thousands at Microsoft. How is this individual going to set himself apart from the pack? Nadella has said himself, one of his critical differentiators as he's risen through the ranks is his ability to engage in forward thinking. Okay? He goes through a process that he calls mental time travel. He essentially projects himself out 5 years, 10 years, 30 years, and he lives in that moment, in that space for a while. And he tries to envision and visualize and explain to himself, what does the world look like in 2050? Where are we headed? And that exercise, that experience of doing that on a regular basis allows him to then extrapolate back to the present day and have some notion of where the world is headed. Okay, so going through this practice actually led him to make a bet and to join, at the time, what was a really unpopular side business, right? And there was this really tiny portion of it called the cloud. Right? This is before Amazon Web Services, before any of this notion of moving to the cloud was mainstream. And in fact, Steve Ballmer himself said, I want you to think hard about this move. It could be your last one at Microsoft, right? Essentially saying, I don't really see an opportunity here, right? So buyer beware, right? And yet Satya was able to see around the corner and understand that this was the future. And so his advice to others throughout the company and beyond is, as a leader, you need to spend time with forward thinking, to see those opportunities, the convergence of trends with our internal capability. Okay? So forward thinkers, right? In a nutshell, you're going to be asking yourself 2 questions. Where are our customers headed? What do they want next? And how does that intersect with emerging technologies? Sound good? Forward thinking? Check. All right, I expect all of you to be engaging in some forward thinking, okay, over the next coming weeks. And I see that we have a hand raised. That might have been confirmation. If you have a question, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and enter it in the Q&A, or hold it to the end of this particular session. I think we'll have a few minutes for Q&A here in a moment. So reputation capital. I'm just going to spend a moment here as well, and then we'll go ahead and conclude. This is one of my favorites. There are so many opportunities to build a name for yourself with just a few small tactics that you can utilize. So some of these: become a founder, take on visible or hard projects that no one else wants and prove yourself, demonstrating strategic judgment, borrowing reputation from others, exhibiting scrappiness. And so one of the most powerful women leaders that we've had a chance to interact with, Indra Nooyi, right? Recently retired, but she was a CEO of Pepsi for a long time. One of her points is, I would raise my hand for difficult assignments all the time. That was her MO. If no one else wanted it, I was there. I'd raise my hand, I would tackle them, right? And she would utilize some of these traits. She founded a mega trends group to help individuals across the org to sync on key trends that were going to impact her industry, her business. So 1, raise your hand, volunteer for those difficult projects. 2, become a founder, even within an established organization. And so Andy Jassy, taking a page from Indra Nooyi, right, he raised his hand to join this burgeoning opportunity, and eventually, as a result, became the CEO of this new business that we now know as Amazon Web Services, right? And just a tiny little business, right? Bezos said, okay, who wants this? Andy raised his hand and took AWS to the behemoth it is today. And as many of you might know, he actually just took over as the new CEO of Amazon proper, as Jeff Bezos has been stepping away. So a lot of opportunity to develop a reputation within your community or your organization. Now, last but not least, impression amplifiers. We're not going to have time to go through each of these. but you can broadcast, you can signal, you can tell a compelling story, you can materialize to bring your concept to life for others, you can compare, you can commit, you can create FOMO. Okay? Many, many different tools. Okay? But to bring this home, I would like you to just ask yourselves and muse and reflect for a moment, do I have innovation capital? How could a little bit more innovation capital help me today? Is that something that would allow me to get more support for my ideas, right? Would I get a little bit more respect and a little bit more runway to try out my concepts? Okay? How can you improve and garner more innovation capital, right? I want to go ahead and leave you with some of those questions. Hopefully you can take some of these ideas and move forward with them. Obviously, if it's piqued your interest, we encourage you to go pick up a copy from Harvard Business Review Press of Innovation Capital. And it's just chock full of stories and additional tips and tricks and suggestions. Okay, but that's going to go ahead and be a conclusion for me on my remarks. I'd love to turn it back over to you, Jesper, and to the audience for any questions that you might have. But thank you so much for your time and for spending a moment here with us today.
Thank you very much, Curtis, for a compelling case for innovation capital. So again, you can chat directly to Curtis and I through the chat function. You just move your mouse. It should be visible there. So Curtis, you mentioned a lot of capabilities or skills that we could basically adapt or use more of. Is there any of the human capital skills, again, forward thinking, as you mentioned, creative problem solving, the persuasion or the creativity that you see is mostly relevant, or is it really dependent on the person? So you see in each of the categories, you could have great leaders or great individuals using each of these skills, or how is there anyone that's more pervasive through the studies that you've done? Or
yeah, what a great question to kick off with, Jesper. So here's how I would think about it, and I would say the same for all of these different elements here. I really think it's about trying to first understand what are my objectives, and then you can be selective about the tools that you're going to apply, right? I think forward thinking is really great for developing a vision, right? It's getting a perspective and a point of view on where is the world headed. And if you don't have that today, you probably should get one, right? As we can see, the world is changing so incredibly rapidly. And so I think forward thinking is really helpful for that. But if you're working with a particular nut or a challenge, right, then being better at creative problem solving or generating ideas using creativity. Now, if you already have an idea, you already have a vision, then you probably want to spend more time on your powers of persuasion and promotion so that you can share your ideas with the world. So I think it's a little bit context specific, if that makes sense, Jesper.
All right, so we've questions coming in, Curtis. So there's a question for human capital. Can you do too much? Do you think actually you could, in terms of being too creative or?
Yeah, it's a great question. And we actually, we have a whole section on high performing teams and the right team composition. So I think you absolutely can over rotate sometimes. I think it depends. I don't know necessarily as an individual, but certainly as a team. If you imagine, if you have a team that's only focused on innovation and discovery, and you kind of neglect execution and delivery, we're going to have a lot of great ideas, but nothing's going to happen, right? We're going to be missing deadlines, and it's just going to be really difficult to actually deliver on the ideas that we have. So I do think, you know, I don't know if that's Michelle who asked that, but I would think about, do I personally have the right balance between discovery and delivery, creativity and execution for my current role? And then if you're a leader, I would think about, do I have the right team composition of individuals that have the right mix of skills?
Great. Another question about the personal impression amplifiers. Is there again any particular things that you would like to any to highlight as opposed to others? Whether that's broadcasting, signaling, storytelling, or are they equally important, you would say, in your
Yeah,
experience?
yeah, I think for the impression amplifiers, I do look at this as a little bit more of kind of an equal quiver of arrows, or a tool set. I don't know that I would emphasize one more than the other. I think it's a little bit more of your personal uh, preference, right? So materializing is a little bit more hands-on, right? It's a little bit, it's about bringing a concept to life through, uh, maybe through a video or a low fidelity prototype or a pilot, right? And so it's a little bit more hands-on, right? Versus, telling a story, right? This is about you spinning a narrative, right? And becoming like a Pixar storyteller. So I think this is a little bit up to you in terms of, okay, what do I feel comfortable with? And then using that to help, once again, amplify your narrative, to amplify your concepts and ideas.
Excellent. Time with you, Curtis, is always flying by, and just want to hear more. But unfortunately, we already ran out of time. I would certainly encourage you to get the book Innovation Capital, and because there's a lot of great tools in it, and how to get started on some of these skills. So thank you very much again for joining us, Curtis, and thank you to the participants that were here today. We will send out the video as we usually do, and also a link to some of the other resources that are available to you on our website, etc. But thank you very much for an inspirational talk, Curtis, and we look forward to see you next time around.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Thank you, and take care.
Bye-bye.